Hey guys, remember to dislike this video if you... Oh wait, the joke doesn't really work anymore, does it? Alright, how about this? Like the video if you would have otherwise disliked it. There we go. And also like it if you actually want to like it. Yeah, that'll work. I am! So just in case anyone watching this isn't aware, this will be the third video I do in this style talking about the Owl House. You know, going over the episodes, giving my thoughts, essentially just me saying, I like this and I like this over and over again. The first video, The Owl House is my new favourite ever thing, was me talking more broadly about the show as a whole. Oh my god, I didn't even mean to do that! I just did the same thing I did in my Q&A. I said whole instead of whole. Where was I? Yeah, I covered a few notable episodes of Season 1 in the process, but the second one, Season 2 is Major League Owl House. That was a more in-depth look at each individual episode of the first half of Season 2, from Separate Tides up to Yesterday's Live. So here in this third one, I'll be doing the same kind of thing as that, going through each of the episodes of the second half of Season 2, from Follies at the Coven Day Parade up to King's Tide. So, goes without saying there will be spoilers, but there won't be spoilers all throughout. See, this time I'm going to go through all 11 episodes one by one as usual, but each part for each new episode was written, recorded, and edited before the next episode aired. Meaning I'll have no hindsight whatsoever, and I'll be giving my complete first-hand thoughts with no knowledge of what will happen in episodes afterwards. I'm taking it 1 week at a time, you could say. So as I'm talking about an episode, it will be the most recent episode for me. So if you're watching this and you haven't quite seen all 11 episodes of Season 2B, maybe you've only seen a few of them so far, then no worries, you can just watch the sections of the episodes you have seen, and you won't be spoiled on anything you haven't. Only this intro section, the final episode, and the outro will be recorded after the season is officially over. Not only does that spread out the workload for me and make it a lot easier rather than cramming all the editing in at the end, but it also means that I'll have a little more to say on the first few episodes compared to the last few, as they'll still be fresh in my mind as I record them. It also means that this video will hopefully be out about a week after the season finishes. You know, maybe I can get mine out before Shifrillis this time. I mean, that's if it even is going to talk about it. I have no clue. And if you're wondering how I've been watching the show, given that I live in England, well, let's just say... You're hard-fitted indeed, being a pirate is a wretched thing! As long as I fully intend to pay for the show when I can, but it's hardly my fault that it takes months for it to arrive on Disney Plus in the UK and Ireland, and Disney Channel no longer runs here either, so unless I want to be bombarded with spoilers on my YouTube homepage, I don't really have much of a choice, and while I wouldn't normally care to not hand money over to the greedy Disney Corporation, I do want to support the creators and the team behind the show itself, especially given how much Disney has royally screwed them over. Catch new Amphibia and Owl House episodes next Saturday. Watch it however you can. You are a pirate! For those of you in the UK or Ireland, episodes 11 to 15 are coming to Disney Plus this upcoming Wednesday, so go watch them. I know I will be. Anywho, I mean, what can I really say to start this off other than... This is the greatest show! Okay, no it's not, but it's pretty good. What I'd actually consider to be the best show I've ever seen would probably be The Good Place, which I may refer to once or twice later on in this video. But it's really incredible just how much of an improvement this show has made since it began. I'm not saying it started off badly. I did really enjoy Season 1 as much as it kind of dragged in the middle section before picking up a lot nearer the end. But really, comparing Season 1 to Season 2, it's like night and day. And not a single one of these 21 episodes has been disappointing in any way. They've literally every single one of them, offered something vital to the show. And that's impressive. But anyway, I hope you can get some enjoyment out of me just rambling on about the events of Season 2B here. I'm pretty happy with everything I said in this video. I think I communicated my points pretty effectively this time. I mean, it's basically just so that I can get them out of my head and into something tangible like a YouTube video where they can stay and, you know, whoever's interested can listen to them in a minimized window or something as they do their own thing that may or may not also be a way to just get ideas out of their head into something tangible. Then again, when making these videos, I constantly dwell on whether I'm saying something because people will agree with me or because I actually believe it, while simultaneously worrying that the way I phrase things may give the wrong impression and knowing that someone watching this video is going to take what I say as if it's the absolute truth and the right way to say it. This is what everyone thinks when scripting a YouTube video, by the way. Don't ever get it into your head that everyone's a professional except you. It's really not true. So, shall we get started? I think maybe we should get started. This video is already a ridiculous length. So here we go. We'll begin with Follies at the Coven Day Parade. Oh, man. What a good place to pick back up from. This episode really feels like it couldn't have been anywhere other than after a mid-season hiatus. It's very much like a welcome back episode, and it basically told us that the second half of this season is going to pick up on everything that the first half set up and follow through with it, which is great. In fact, it already wrapped up a couple of things that I thought would be dragged out way longer. It's very much the separate tides of Season 2B. In fact, it even starts exactly the same way. And now that I think about it, that means that the first and last episodes of Season 2 both contain the word tide, and Bellows said that the Day of Unity had something to do with the tide, so I'm already making connections and we haven't even started yet. So, where do we begin? Oh my god, Hootie has no skin! Let's start with everybody's favourite character in the entire show, Kikimora.
What?
Okay, I am kidding, but I mean, I've never really been on board the whole Kikimora hate train. I mean, yeah, in the context of the show, obviously I don't root for her, but, like, she's enjoyable to watch. Suffer. She's a character that you enjoy hating rather than one that you genuinely would rather wasn't in the show. And, you know, like I said before, she has one of the coolest character designs ever. I know a few people found it a bit strange that Luce, Ida, and King seemed so quick to join forces with her, but I buy it. I mean, it's Luce. She sees the good side of everyone, and, you know, Ida and King would trust her judgment. You know, that, and with the whole conflict going on in Luce's mind after the events of the last episode, if Luce can help Kikimora fulfill the Emperor's orders and get her home to see her family at the same time, it'll pretty much justify to Luce that she can do a similar thing, you know, see her mother and stay on the Boiling Isles at the same time, and she won't have to choose one or the other. And to be fair, she does, and the plan works.
You've been such a help to me, human. You really are a kind person. And an utter fool.
Okay, I've changed my mind. I do hate Kikimora. Alright, so she double-crosses them. But, I mean, she only double-crosses them because Terra promised her a promotion, not that she was lying up about the whole seeing her family thing. So, she's still terrible, but she could be worse. I don't know, I'm teetering. I mean, at least she got her hand dragon thing back. Anyway, Terra Snapdragon, which is a flippin' awesome name, by the way, is the head of the Plant Coven. And I do like that this season is slowly introducing us to each of the Coven leaders. And you can see why they're the leaders. Like I said, they all seem to be masters of their respective magic types. Also, she's brainwashed Rain. Rainwashed? I just made that up. That's not even in the script. And has wiped their memory of everything that happened in Ida's Requiem, and probably quite a bit before that as well, which confuses me a little because, like, Rain's whole thing was that they worked their way up to head of the Bard Coven because they wanted to stop Belos's plans, so I'm not really sure why they just seem to be on Team Belos now, but then again, maybe memory wiping is a little more complex than just deleting a specific period of time. Oh yeah, Rain is in this episode. Good god, there's a lot going on. Rain and Ida have a little fight as she tries to bring Rain back and get them to remember. I mean, I say fight, but it's not really, because neither one of them actually wants to hurt the other. And one really small moment that I really liked was when the guards were approaching both of them, and Rain picks up the invisibility glyph, and for just a second you think they're going to use it and let Ida get captured, but then they just give it to Ida and tell her to go. It's a really small thing, but it lets you know that Rain is still in there somewhere. So, just a couple quick things. Hootie and King had some funny moments.
It's me, your good buddy Bellows!
Kill that monstrosity!
Not the first time I've heard that!
Also, we got a Bellows face reveal. Oh no, wait. We got that 2 episodes ago. But it's an in-universe face reveal this time to the whole of the Boiling Isles. I do wonder if it maybe would have been better if they didn't show him back in Eclipse Lake and just left it until now, especially because of how nonchalant it was then. I don't know, I guess there must have been some reason they did that. And near the end of the episode, Terra says,
"The Emperor says he's looking forward to meeting you, human."
Which at first seemed kind of weird, given that they already met. I mean, maybe she phrased it weird and meant seeing you again, or maybe it was some kind of oversight. But then Amity brings it up again right at the end of the episode, so obviously that was intentional. So that's really weird. God, the mystery around Bellos is just getting deeper and deeper every single episode. I'm very interested to know how this is all going to play out. I also do want to briefly mention that one scene with Amity and Willow, because I gotta say, I am so glad that the show hasn't just dropped the whole thing about those two having a rocky history. It was starting to seem like after the minor reconcile they had back in Understanding Willio, that they were just fine after that, and I was worried that people were reading into subtext that wasn't really there and kind of inferring that Willow was still harboring some hate towards Amity based on a few shots here and there of her looking mildly upset whenever Amity's around. And come to think of it, since that episode there's never actually been a moment with just Amity and Willow. It's either Luce and Amity, or Luce and Willow, or Gus and Willow, or Luce, Willow and Amity, or Luce, Gus and Willow, or Gus, Willow and Amity, or all 4 of them together. Only now do we have a scene with just Willow and Amity, and thankfully the subtext was was there the whole time, or at least it's a lot more obvious now that it's basically just text. You know, they're okay around each other, but it's still a little raw and awkward. And I'm kind of getting the impression that while they both want to go back to being really good friends again, Amity is a lot closer to that and kind of just feels like they already are there. Willow, on the other hand, not so much. But then again, that could be me just reading subtext that isn't there now, because I think I'm in the minority on that. A lot of people took this scene to mean they're fine, they're on good terms now. I don't know, we'll just have to wait and see if that gets expanded upon later on. If that's what it was, fine, I'll eat my words. But if there is more to it, then I was right. At least it does seem like we're getting a fairly Willow-centric episode a little later this season, which we do desperately need. I mean, it's unfortunate that her and Gus have been sidelined so much over the course of this show that they're basically tertiary characters now. And the show's a lot more interested in other characters like Amity and Hunter, and even Rain to an extent. I mean, we know there's going to be a further look into their backstory later on. We did get that one episode with Gus this season, and nobody brings it up because it was the same episode that Amity kissed Luce. I mean, I don't want to be one of those people who's like,
the show actually has a rich, interesting lore, and everybody just focuses on the gay stuff.
And like, yeah, they do. But, I mean, that's because the gay stuff is so good. I mean, it's arguably the best thing about the show, and it's what it's known for, basically. You can't really blame people for devoting a lot of attention to that aspect of it, because it's kind of deserved. So, with that being said, I guess I may as well follow suit and talk about that instead now. Luce and Amity, they're adorable. They always will be. End of discussion. Okay, but seriously, this is why you don't wait until the very end of a show to have the two characters get together. Like, I mean, sure, that the build-up and the whole, like, hiding their true feelings stuff is fun for a little while, but the two of them just actually being a couple is clearly the better part. I mean, we can all agree on that, right? You know, that's why everyone prefers Monica and Chandler over Ross and Rachel, because they're a healthy couple and they spend half of the show together. Also, Friends has 10 seasons. I could have sworn it only had like 6. I can't help but wonder if there are episodes of that show that I've actually never even seen before. But back to Luce and Amity. It is great seeing them together, which we hadn't really gotten yet because Luce was sick throughout most of Eclipse Lake and then Amity wasn't even in Yesterday's Life. And, you know, you can't help but feel just immense satisfaction anytime one of them calls the other girlfriend, because you just know that it's going to piss off some higher-ups at Disney and some middle-aged weirdos. But they're just out here like, yeah, we're doing this, and if you have a problem with it, that's on you. And I love how good they work together in not just the life-threatening combat situations, but also how much they care about each other's feelings. With Amity kind of knowing that Luce isn't telling her what really happened when she went and visited her mum, and despite being given an opportunity to find out for herself after Luce leaves her phone behind, she doesn't. She respects Luce's privacy and trusts that she'll tell her herself, which she does by the end, and admits that she didn't tell Amity because she didn't want to disappoint her and was trying to figure out a solution on her own. But they just talk it out and they're fine. And they do this because they have a flippin' healthy relationship. In any other show, Amity getting a hold of Luce's phone would have just been a quick and easy way to create some drama between the two of them, but they don't do that. People say this show is full of cliches. I think one thing that's going to remain consistent in regards to Luce and Amity's relationship going forward is that the thing that you know is going to happen is always going to happen sooner than you think it is. I mean, hell, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't even wait until the end of the season before they have a proper kiss. I mean, it's probably going to be like 3 episodes time. I like doing it in this format. I like doing this week by week because it means I can predict stuff. And if it's wrong, then I can edit it out. But if it's right, well, I mean, there's no actual proof that I'm recording these week by week. You just have to take my word for it. My point is, Luce and Amity are speedrunning their relationship, and I genuinely can't understand why anyone thinks these two are going to break up. Oh, I hope I don't regret saying that. Okay, so let's just get the obvious thing out of the way first. Philip Witterbane, the human who lived on the Boiling Isles in the 1600s and who we've been hearing snippets from his journal since all the way back in Through the Looking Glass Ruins, that Philip Witterbane is Emperor Bellos. I think that's true. I'm pretty sure that's true. And at this point, even though, you know, I'll admit I've been hesitant of the theory since it first arose, I hope that's true. Frankly, I'd be kind of disappointed if it's not, because that is very clearly what this ending is telling us, right? But then at the same time, I mean, this show's still pushing the whole, like, two brothers idea that was introduced back in Yesterday's Lie. So, if Philip is Bellos, which he is, what happened to his brother? And if Bellos is so against wild magic, why does Philip use glyphs in the same way that Luce does? And how the hell does the whole Hunter Homunculus hypothesis fit into this?
There's a lot of questions here to be answered.
Do you know what this whole thing kind of reminds me of? Do you remember Five Nights at Freddy's? Do you remember on the very first night of the very first game, we were introduced to an event called
The Bite of 87.
Was that the Bite of 87?
Where an animatronic bit off somebody's frontal lobe. And then after the final night, 3 games later, on what was at the time thought to be the final chapter in the FNAF series, it obviously wasn't, but stay with me, we were shown in an old arcade pixelized style a flashback to a child's birthday party. And this happened. Whoops. This is the wrong clip. And that, right there, was the mystery that lasted 4 whole games solved. Was that the Bite of 87? Yes, it was. Or was it the Bite of 83? What is the Bite of 83? Well, it was a theory that was floating around after FNAF 4 release that supposedly proved that the pixelized flashbacks actually took place in 1983, not 1987, loosely based on some random TV that no one would bother to look at, and it doesn't actually even prove anything, and the knowledge that if you lose your frontal lobe, you are physically unable to have nightmares like the ones depicted in the base game. Except that's dumb. Of course, this is the Bite of 87, you idiots. And it was pretty much from this point onwards that a lot of people just simply lost interest in the lore of these games. And that's kind of my whole problem with these subversive mystery payoffs. If the payoff is so obviously leading you to an answer, but the actual answer is hidden behind background details and offhand comments and circumstantial evidence, what you've basically done is rewarded the 2% of your audience who are actually going to waste their time piecing all this together, and punish the rest of us. Basically telling us, you know this thing that we pretty much told you was the answer to the mystery? It's not. Don't you look foolish. Now, granted, at the time of writing this, I obviously do not know how this is all going to play out, and if Philip and Belos are 2 different people, which they're not, based on how they go about revealing that, this whole thing could be salvaged. You know, don't get me wrong, I'm not concerned. I trust that the creators of the show know what they're doing, but at this point, I think having Belos just be Philip, which he is the best option here. I mean, it's clearly what you're setting up. It's just missing that final nail in the coffin of confirmation. I like that, the coffin of confirmation, that's good. What makes a good mystery is the clues being there for you to find if you're willing to go looking for them, but, you know, casual viewers typically won't, and either way, the payoff should still make sense to you once it's explained. And then you can go back and realize that there were clues dotted around the whole time. Not for the text to clearly hint at one thing, but have the actual truth buried underneath 100 feet of Easter eggs and useless outside trivia. Do you get what I'm saying? Anyway, that's probably enough about Philip. Let's talk about the rest of the episode. This is a time travel episode, and I'm getting the impression that people tend to have a bit of a love-hate relationship with those. They're risky if you don't handle them properly. Like, I mean, I love Back to the Future, but that's like very entry-level time travel stuff. I mean, even in the second film, at its most convoluted, it's still simple enough to follow. You go too far beyond that and it can get annoying. I think this episode goes for a bit more of a Doctor Who approach, where, despite being known for time travel, is really more just travel. Only on rare occasions do things actually get, you know...
Timey-wimey.
Timey what? Timey-wimey?
I think time travel tends to work best when it's just like a means to an end. You know, with maybe a few gags built around it too. And that's the approach that this episode takes. Mostly. See, here's where things start getting a little bit more complex. If Philip is Belos, which he is, does that mean that when he said that he was looking forward to meeting Luce, he was talking about their actual first meeting in this episode? Is the main reason he started this whole dictatorship all because he was punched in the face 300 years ago? And so he just became some kind of witch racist? No. For one, he's from 17th century England, he probably already was. And 2, the entire reason that Lilith punched him was because he led her and Luce to be sacrificed to the Stone Sleeper. Which, by the way, Stone Sleeper lungs from the Grimwalker book. It's all coming together. And earlier in the episode, we see him being tormented by these 2 guys who were presumably named Green Fang and Red Fang, you know, after their coloured fangs, obviously. And they're asking him what happened to their brother Blue Fang and his palisman. Later on, we see in Philip's bag a Blue Fang, along with what is probably Blue Fang's palisman. Not to mention the dozens of dead palismans at his disposal. Pretty safe to assume that this guy has, in fact, always been a dick. We've only really heard little snippets from him from his journal, and it's made clear in this episode that he's not exactly telling the whole truth, writing himself to be the hero of the story. Almost as if he's expecting someone to read this one day. I mean, he does end up donating it to the library after all. Really makes you rethink what we heard back in Eclipse Lake.
I was lucky to get out alive. My companions were not.
Tragically, I could not save my companions.
And as far as the whole looking forward to meeting you thing, I mean, why would Belos be looking forward to that if, for him, that happened centuries ago? You know, that doesn't make sense, does it? I'm willing to bet that line from Terra has yet to be explained. And I'm sorry, but I just can't latch on to the idea that he actually remembers Lilith and Luce. I mean, Lilith used to be the leader of the Emperor's Coven and then betrayed him, which he clearly did not see coming. And again, this was centuries ago. He's clearly been planning this whole thing that involves the Collector well before the two of them even showed up, so no, I do not think being punched by some random witch was what drove him to this. I mean, it kind of helped, sure, but it caused it? No, not a chance. And then on top of that, you have people taking it even further and theorizing that the character Flora Displora was sent by the Emperor to make Lilith feel bad, thus convincing her to go back in time with Luce in order to meet him in the first place, like some kind of 4D chess move, and... I know people like their theories, and like I do too. I love me a good theory. But I think there has to be a line somewhere. A line that, once crossed, enters you into conspiracy territory. And that's not really a territory you want to be in. And this is ultimately why people stopped caring about the Five Nights at Freddy's lore, because it just all became way too much. And I think Mr. Hippo himself said it best when he said,
You know, sometimes a story is just a story. If you try to read into every little thing and find meaning in everything anyone says, you'll just drive yourself crazy.
But at the end of the day, I guess none of this really matters. I mean, by the time this video comes out, we're probably going to have a lot more answers, and most of what I just said will be rendered completely unimportant anyway. And to be fair, there is evidence presented in this episode to all of that being true, you know, like how the exact device that Lilith uses to locate the time pools just happens to be in a box that Flora brought over that very same day. Maybe it is all one big setup by Bellows, and maybe I'm the foolish one for not thinking much of it. I still do think that there is a point when theories get a bit too much to handle, but maybe this isn't one of those times. I'd be more than happy to admit I'm wrong on this, but we'll just have to wait and see. Well, I'll have to wait. Me right now as I record this. Probably not anyone listening to this in 9 weeks' time. So let's move on. Ida got some much-needed closure with her father. That was nice. That's all I really have to say on that. It was nice. It's great that Ida has now made up with every member of her family. I don't know if they were intentionally making a connection between Ida attacking Del and Lilith attacking Philip. They're probably just two completely unrelated plots in the same episode. But I just recently made that comparison after Del says something about letting the past stay in the past. But again, I highly doubt that Philip even remembers getting punched in the nose, let alone considers it any kind of turning point or significant event in his life. Whatever, I've been over this. How do I keep managing to bring the topic back to Philip? I really liked Luce and Lilith's dynamic in this episode. It's really strange to think that there was a point when everyone absolutely despised Lilith, and now she's like universally loved. This show is very good at making us hate the characters we expect to like, and then love the characters that we expect to hate. And I love that Luce calls her cool Aunt Lilith, and she's not just saying that to humor Lilith, or make her feel better and she actually finds her cringy or anything. No, she genuinely thinks she's cool, and I love that. We should all aspire to be more like Luce in that regard, really. Any sport in a storm. Every time I hear that said out loud, I can't help but just think of
Any part in a storm!
So, after writing and editing that section about Elsewhere and Elsewhen, I was a little worried that maybe I went a bit too hard on belittling some of the more outlandish theories that people have had about the show's lore. Yeah, I no longer feel bad about that. The show is literally poking fun of that itself now. The entire B-plot of this episode is Amity and Luce coming up with crazy theories about who wrote the Good Witch Azura books, and the big reveal is that there is no big reveal at all. Some human wrote them, Tibbles found them, and worked with Matt and Tiny to pass them off as their own for a scam, and that scam didn't even work, which is actually genius. I love that. It does it in a way that's not insulting though. Like, it's basically saying whatever answers that we do get, yeah, they may not be as intricate or exciting as the ones we expect to get, but you know, you're not wrong for coming up with your own theories, and you know, in fact, it's kind of encouraging it. Ultimately, what you've got to remember is the underlying theme of this show is that nothing comes down to destiny. The Owl House spits in the face of destiny. But you know what? That's actually all I have to say on that side of the episode, because this time, the Luce and Amity B-plot thankfully did not overshadow the A-plot. That being said, Willow was still slightly overshadowed this episode, but not massively. This is still the most an episode has ever focused on Willow thus far. Take that how you will. But yeah, Willow finally got some much needed attention. I said in one of my other videos, I can't actually remember which one it was, that Willow's development felt a bit less showy and a bit more telly. Here it's definitely more showy. I mean, you can see the clear difference in Willow's character now compared to who she was back in early season 1. She knows exactly what she wants to do, and she'll work hard to do it. And that, in turn, garners her more respect from her classmates. And yeah, she still has a couple moments where that doubt slips back in. I mean, she went through, presumably, years of everybody at school thinking that she was basically worthless. I mean, that's bound to stick with you a little bit. But she always brings it back, and she shows that everybody just misjudged her. And she misjudged herself. But, after all,
Not judging a book by its cover is a baby rule even babies know.
Speaking of babies, why is one of the members of the opposite Flyer Derby team a literal baby? Why is one of them a teacher, in fact? Oh yeah, the Abomination teacher is back in this episode too. His name is apparently Professor Homunculus, obviously a play on the word homunculus, which means that I may have to stop calling it the Hunter Homunculus hypothesis to avoid confusion. And speaking of Hunter, let's talk about him now. That was good. Did you like that? That smooth transition from Willow to Hunter I did there? That was... Bet you didn't even notice. Like, I put a lot of effort into writing these and making all the sections flow nicely and not having too many, like, abrupt, let's talk about this now moments and stuff like that. I was really happy with the section I did on Eclipse Lake back in the last video. That whole bit just, like, flows really smoothly. I'm really proud of how I put that all together. I realize I've ironically completely broken the flow now, so let me just do a quick meme edit to fill the quota. Okay, and off we go. Let's talk about Hunter now. So this is definitely my favourite Hunter episode so far. It did take me a while to click with his character when it seemed like everyone else just immediately liked him after his first appearance. But I get it now. I get him now. I get what they're doing there. He's basically a teenager who has no idea how to be a teenager. Basically being raised within the Emperor's Coven and being around only adults and authority figures and believing whatever the Emperor wanted him to believe. And on the rare occasions he steps out into the real world and encounters people who challenge those beliefs and question authority, he's understandably confused, but slowly but surely starts to question it himself. He only joins Willow's Flyer Derby team as a way to enlist everyone into the Emperor's Coven, but he ends up actually enjoying himself and making friends with them. It's just nice. It's really nice. Also, it's weird that the fake name that he uses is Caleb, because honestly, he looks like a Caleb. It's weird. Like, their name actually suits him more than Hunter does. Maybe there's a reason for that. I don't know. We'll have to see. And I do like that there's no moment where they find out the truth themselves and confront him. Because like, after they win, he pretty much just tells them that he had an ulterior motive. And he has a smile on his face the entire time when he reveals to the group that he's actually the Golden Guard and he's enlisting them into the Emperor's Coven. And even when the four of them are in a literal prison cell, he's just talking to them like they're on good terms and he's doing them some kind of favor. Because he's a sheltered teenager who genuinely doesn't understand why anyone wouldn't want this. But thankfully, after realizing that he's going to be putting his new friends through hell against their will, I don't know why anyone would willfully go through hell, but whatever, he stands up to Darius and he lets them go, especially after realizing what will happen to all their palismen, because he's probably a lot more sympathetic to that now, having his own palisman. By the way, his palisman's name is Flapjack, which that's oh darn, I forgot to talk about Lilith's palisman in the last episode. It actually took me a while to even realize that this random bird was even Lilith's palisman, because we'd never actually seen it off of the staff, and it looks so much less threatening. Oh, you know what else I forgot to mention last episode? Steve! I love that Steve is a recurring character now. He's just one of the Coven Guards. He literally doesn't look any different from any of the other Coven Guards, but he had like this one scene back in the season 1 episode Sense and Insensitivity, and the fandom just kind of ate him up. So I love that the show is just bringing him back as a series regular now, and I know for a fact that we're going to see more of him later on. I can't wait to see him on his flipping motorbike. That's going to be awesome. Steve on a motorbike. What does the world come to? But yeah, I like that this episode ends on a more positive note for Hunter, and he and Willow end the episode as friends, I guess, sort of. Just goes to show that he needs just a little nudge in the right direction. And I couldn't help but think back on the previous Hunter episodes in hindsight. You know, if he hadn't noticed the portal key, would he have actually taken on board Amity's advice about not needing to prove your worth for affection? And if it wasn't for Kikimora, would he have ended up letting loose and all the palismen leave unharmed? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. Either way, I'm a lot more invested in Hunter's development than I used to be. And I appreciate that he's not going through like a typical redemption arc. More so, his eyes are just being slowly open to new ideas. One thing that was very unexpected was that after standing up to him, Darius is actually like impressed with Hunter and pleased that he managed to make some friends. I definitely didn't think that Darius, of all people, would end up being any kind of positive parental figure to Hunter. But, you know, I guess it's not exactly a high bar. And I guess that's all I really have to say on this episode, actually. I'm kind of glad. I thought that all of these sections were going to be at least 8 minutes long, and the whole video would end up being like 2 hours. Well, actually, it may still be, but well, let's move on anyway, because even though I'm going in blind, I have a feeling that these next few episodes are going to be a lot to unpack. I'm scared. Alright, this is going to be a tougher section to get through, I think. I'll talk about the other stuff first, and then I'll leave the, heavier subject matter until the end. So Reaching Out focuses mainly on the relationship between Amity and her dad, and gives a bit more of an insight to him as a character. We'd seen from Escaping Expulsion that he wasn't just basically like a male version of Odalia. He was more interested in seeing Amity succeed, rather than trying to control her like Odalia was, and seemed to just ignore her all the rest of the time. But he's not so much a bad father, as he is just an emotionally absent one. He cares about Amity and he wants to protect her, but doesn't ever stop to consider what she wants and whether she can look after herself. So it was nice to have him and Amity start to build a better relationship with each other by the end of the episode. And it's a great moment when he goes in for a hug, but then Amity pulls back and goes for a handshake instead. Yeah, it's good. She's setting boundaries. This isn't a all is forgiven, everything's fine now, but it's a start. And I know everyone's brought this up already, but it's nice that when Amity tells him that she's dating Luce, Alador doesn't question it beyond her just being Ida's student/child. Not that she's a girl, not that she's a human, just that she's Ida's. I know I've said it before, but it is just so refreshing to just have it be completely normalized. Which is why it was a little strange that some people were saying that this was like Amity coming out to her dad. Because it's not really. I mean, the Owl House universe is sort of designed to be completely devoid of homophobia of any kind. So coming out wouldn't really be a thing. The only reason we do that in real life is because it's stigmatized. And whether we mean to or not, we assume every person we meet to be straight unless they tell us otherwise. I don't know why. It's just a thing we do. We live in a society and all that. We also had a little side plot with Edric helping Ida and King, giving him a bit more development in the process, and showing that he's also interested in trying different types of magic rather than just illusions. It's almost like this whole Coven system is restrictive and harmful and maybe shouldn't exist. And I really do like the parallels between Alador dissuading Amity from doing what she wants to do, instead of what he sees as what she should be doing, and Ida actively encouraging Edric to do the opposite. That's nice. By the way, I like that Edric's talisman is a bat, because of that one episode where he wanted to keep a bat as... Is it the same bat? But yeah, it was cool to see him be more involved, because this is going to sound weird, but I kind of sort of forgot that Edric and Emera were actual characters. I didn't forget that they existed in the show, but I just sort of saw them both as an extension of other characters, like Amity or Luce. I don't know if this is making any sense to anyone. What I mean is, once I realized that this episode was giving Edric a bit more development as a character, I sort of went, oh yeah, I didn't consider that as a possibility. Willow, Gus, King, all of these characters who deserved more depth and I wanted more depth from. And then there's just Edric and Emera, who I'd never really give a second thought to. They could have remained the same throughout the entire show, and I wouldn't have thought for a second that was in any way an odd decision. And also, I love the fact that in every scene we've seen the two of them in the entire show up until this point, they were disguising what they actually looked like. That's great. And then we move on to Luce's side of the story. So Luce spends this entire episode trying to distract herself by any means necessary so that she doesn't have a moment to be alone and think about things.
Pepe Sylvia. This name keeps coming up over and over again. Every day, Pepe's mail's getting sent back to me. Pepe Sylvia, Pepe Sylvia. I look in the mail. Well, this whole box is Pepe Sylvia!
Because today is an important day for her, but it's something that she doesn't want to think about as much as her phone constantly tries to remind her. So after driving herself mad trying to rapidly progress the show's ongoing plotlines, she's given an opportunity to help Amity join the Bonesborough Brawl against her father's wishes. And once she's done that, and Amity's got it covered, she decides to join it herself just to keep her mind busy and not have to think about things. But ultimately, she gets consumed by it, lashes out, and ends up lying to Amity and getting her caught by her father in the process. And then when she goes to apologize, Amity does manage to break through to her and get her to talk about the thing that she doesn't want to talk about. And honestly, this whole scene is just... okay, like I did with that one scene from Ida's Requiem, even though I'm a little bit concerned about getting a copyright strike, I think I just have to let it speak for itself.
I don't talk about this because it happened a long time ago, and it's totally not an issue anymore, but today's the anniversary of my dad passing away. That's not an excuse for what I did. Like I said, it happened a while ago, so I didn't want to bring it up. He always brought us flowers on our birthdays, so after he passed away, we started picking flowers for each other. And then we'd visit his grave and me and my mom would spend the day together. It's nice, but this year I'm not with her, and I don't have any flowers.
And when you told me about the problem with your dad, I don't know. Maybe I was jealous or just needed a distraction. I was dumb. I'm sorry.
So it's just occurred to me that in all of these Owl House videos, not once have I actually mentioned the voice acting. Well, actually, I did briefly mention Alex Hirsch before, but it's all pretty top tier stuff, and when that's combined with good animation, you've got some genuinely compelling media that could easily rival or even surpass a lot of live action stuff, you know? It's one of the main reasons that I love animation so much as a medium, and generally prefer it because of the time and care and sheer talent that so many people dedicate to it. And screw anyone who doesn't take animation as seriously as live action. And yeah, okay, fine, I was wrong about the whole kiss thing. I still think it will be before the finale, though. I did know that they'd go back to the Grum tree at some point, and that was really cool. Neither of them acknowledged it, but I love that Amity just chose to go and sit beneath that exact tree like it's important to her. And not too long before Luce said it, I did guess the thing about her dad correctly, so that's something. Whatever, I mean, who really cares about predictions, I say after mine are proven wrong. If I have to give one criticism, which I don't, that's not what this video is for, it was basically retreading the same thing from Follies. I mean, I get that it was a more sensitive issue this time, and more understandable that Luce was keeping it to herself, but we did do this just 3 episodes ago, so I do hope that trusting and being open and honest with her girlfriend isn't something that Luce will need to, like, keep relearning multiple times, you know? That being said, it totally makes sense here. It's certainly not a fault of the episode, because it's a completely understandable way for Luce to react. When you're met with sudden overwhelming emotion and guilt, and if you're as selfless as Luce is, your brain does what it has to do to cope with that, and a lot of the time that means to block it out. And talking about it openly with someone else, even someone you care about, is the opposite of blocking it out. But the more often you block it out, the worse it comes back, and the only way to stop it is to let it out with someone who will listen and understand. It's the right thing to do, but your brain tries its damnedest to stop you from doing it as some kind of weird means of protecting you. It's just how we're wired up there. It doesn't make sense. So Luce does everything that she can to distract herself so that she doesn't have to think about it. But every time that alarm goes off on her phone, those thoughts come back, and they come back worse. And it took me multiple rewatches to realize that that's why when the Abomaton soldier's alarm starts blaring, she flips out and attacks it, and then immediately feels guilty about doing so, which is why she lies to Amity about it straight afterwards, and I completely get that. So I am going to get a little bit personal here, not overly, because thankfully I'm lucky enough to still have both my parents, and have never really had to deal with the loss of anybody in like my immediate family or anyone that I had a close relationship with. I just want to make that clear, that I can't relate to that specifically, and I'm not trying to take the experience away from somebody who has, but the guilt part is something that I have experienced, and I can understand the whole not wanting to burden other people with what you're dealing with thing. There have been multiple times in my life where I'm going through something and not told anyone about it, and then subsequently felt guilty about not being able to tell anyone about it, because I'm just not good at that, which really sucks, because I'm surrounded by people who I care about and who care about me, and they can be open and honest with me, and I'll listen, but for some reason I struggle to do the same back to them a lot of the time, and I feel guilty about that, because I don't want it to come across as though I don't trust them enough to listen to me. It's just a very hard barrier to break through sometimes. And even as I'm saying all this out loud now, I'm feeling guilty that I might be overshadowing people who have actually had to deal with a close personal loss and can relate heavily to Luce in that regard. And yet I'm over here talking about my own unrelated issues and taking the limelight away. Honestly, you wouldn't believe how many times I ended up rewriting this over and over and considered just deleting this entire section from the script, because I kept thinking it would be better if I don't say any of this at the risk of wording it wrong. And no one will know I was even planning to. You know, what if somebody takes it the wrong way? What if people think I'm trying to earn sympathy points, or only putting in a personal anecdote so that this review thing feels more real to anyone listening? Do I even need to be saying any of this? My point is, I can understand why Luce lied to Amity, even if I can't relate to the specific reason why she did what she did. Okay? Yeah, I could have just said that, I suppose. It's a very complex thing. But I know bottling stuff up is not a healthy way of dealing with things, and distractions can be a good way to cope, but they'll only work for so long. It's not a long-term solution. You know, your emotions are there to be felt. Feel them. You know, even as I say all this out loud, I kind of feel better, because even though, like, I know I'm not technically talking to you guys, you're just hearing pre-recorded sound waves of stuff I'd said 6 weeks ago to a microphone. It feels good to get some of that stuff out, you know, and have you guys here listening to it. So, thank you for listening. Oh man, I was expecting another hard hitter with this one. Thank God it actually ended up being a pretty nice, tame, light-hearted episode. I think we needed that. Them's the Breaks Kid tells the story of how Ida and Rain first met, and we got to see both of them as children, as well as a bunch of other characters too, cameo or otherwise. So that was cool to have pretty much a whole episode of that. It was interesting how they did the voices for the younger versions of some of the characters. Like, obviously you have characters like Bump, who's just a higher-pitched version of his current voice, but the younger characters are voiced by different people. Natalie Palamides, I don't know, I'm not good with pronunciations. She returns as young Ida for, I think, the third time, and she nails it. She gets the cadence of Ida down perfectly. But I think Lilith had a different voice actor this time, which was a little jarring. Sissy Jones did a fine job back in Knock Knock Knocking on Hootie's Door, but I guess she was a little older in that particular flashback, so fine. I was expecting to see a little bit more of Lilith. She literally gets dropped about 3 minutes into the story, but it's fine, I get it. The episode's not really about her. It was an interesting choice to give young Rain a bit more of a feminine sounding voice. I mean, I suppose everyone sounds feminine as a child, so. Rain's voice actors have been, and again, I might mess these pronunciations up, Avi Roque and Blue Del Barrio as current Rain and young Rain respectively. Both of whom are non-binary actors, by the way, which is pretty cool. You'll love to see that. I know a lot of people picked up on the fact that young Rain seems a lot less timid than current Rain, which isn't odd exactly. I mean, it's pretty common for children to be more confident, and it's the kind of thing that can develop later in life. But Rain's thing was more stage fright and public speaking, that sort of thing. You know, one-on-one, they seem completely fine. And around Ida especially, they seem to be, pretty chill and just themselves. Themselves. Wait, is it themselves or themselves? I don't know. I think it's themselves, but they both sound right. I don't know. I'll have to look that up. Whatever, Rain and Ida are pretty adorable together, and they have good chemistry. And I like that the whole training program thing takes place in the same building as Convention, and that Ida and Rain met in basically the same place that Luce and Amity first properly bonded with each other, so that was a neat detail. And when they all played Covens vs. Wild, and Ida was a Coven witch and Rain was a Wild witch, yeah, that irony was not lost on me. Pretty nuts how early they indoctrinate this mentality into the witches on the Boiling Isles. A couple other things, I like that we got to see more of Bump being an actually supportive principal, or vice principal, in this episode. I do wonder what ended up happening to the former Principal Faust. Also, I have to bring this up. What is up with that trustful scene? I know this show seems to get away with some kind of dark imagery at times, but that was surprisingly extreme. They can show that, but they can't say hell, apparently. I mean, I know it's an illusion prank on Ida's part, but the fact that the green jelly demon cried out, "Not again," immediately afterwards, Jesus Christ. But yeah, overall, this was a pretty light-hearted episode and a nice change of pace. And oh my god, what a flippin' brilliant plot twist that was at the end. Flawlessly set up throughout the episode that Rain, through their bard magic, could change the chemistry of a drink by whistling into it, and not once did it occur to me until it was literally shown at the end that they could be doing that for the mind-wiping drinks Terra had been giving them. That's genius! And I went back and watched Follies again, and sure enough, Rain whistles into the tea. It's not even subtle. It draws your attention to the sound effect, and yet nobody gave it a second thought. It's just Rain blowing on it because it's hot, and they just happen to make a whistle sound while doing it. I drink 5 to 10 cups of tea a day. I've never accidentally whistled while blowing on it. Genius. It's absolute genius. And this is a good example of why I love watching reaction channels, because seeing the collective penny drop at this moment was just euphoria. And while it's left a bit ambiguous as to whether they've been doing this the entire time, or have only recently caught on to it, there's no question that Rain is definitely still rebelling against Belos. And possibly even Darius is too, which would make some of his actions in the past couple episodes make a bit more sense. So aside from Hunter, Kikimora, and presumably Terra, how many people previously assumed to be on Belos' side are actually not? And so now, when it comes to the Day of Unity, we know what, we know when, we know where, we know how.
What we don't know is why.
And so I can't wait for the next episode. I've seen the little preview clip, which I'm assuming is going to be the cold open, and I can already tell it's going to be dropping a heck ton of lore. My god, we're not even halfway yet. Whenever I begin writing these sections, I'm always met with the same initial thought. Where do I even begin? And it usually doesn't last all that long. I find a suitable place to begin pretty quickly. But this time, I really do not know where to begin. I guess I'll start with this. Isn't it strange how this episode had 2 jokes about Luce saying a phrase with some type of human world food in it, and then having another character react confused, not being familiar with that food?
We're in the Emperor's mind! That's bananas!
I don't know what those are, and I don't care to.
And I bet dollars to donuts that he can't speak to the Titan.
Do you think she's right?
Don't let the Titan hear you say that.
What even is a donut?
Okay, I guess I'll actually start with one thing that I found a little weird about this episode. This is probably a minor thing, it's probably something like only I picked up on, but some of the pacing was a little off-putting. So that preview clip was the cold open, which worked fine. But surprisingly, after the trimmed down opening credits, it didn't immediately flash back to what happened before they entered his mind, which was unexpected. Hunter's all like, remember what happened at the night market, as if that wasn't less than a minute ago. It's a minor thing, I know, but it could have just like immediately cut to Luce's side of the flashback after the opening, and I feel like that might have worked better, because you could pretty easily gather what Hunter's doing from the remaining context anyway. In fact, I did the edit myself and it cuts out almost a minute. You know, plenty of time for, let's say, a full version of the opening credits. I just wanted at least one more time before the series ends, please. The other one was during the like huge reveal part, it just interrupts that with a cut back to the Owl House and them trying to do the return spell, and there's some hooty humor in there, which is some real tonal whiplash. It just seemed like that scene could have been earlier, like, I don't know, maybe right after the memory on the knee, or just after Belos appears for real, where there's an actual break anyway, instead of right in the middle of the super tense emotional Philip reveal. Talk about an inopportune interruption, am I right, Hootie? Again, it might seem like an inconsequential thing, but just a couple little changes like that and it would have elevated this episode a lot, in my opinion. We also got introduced to the Collector, and hot take maybe, but I don't like this character. I'm sorry, I genuinely hate characters like this. The whole, like, playfully chaotic, shape-shifting, speaking in rhyme stuff. It is just I don't know, it's a character archetype that I honestly find so annoying. But I will say, I'm intrigued as to what they're going to do with this character in the coming episodes. He says he's trapped beneath these bones, and doesn't seem to have any corporeal form, so I'm interested to know how exactly he factors into Belos' plan. Maybe he's the key to uniting the two realms in the first place, as he possibly exists in some kind of in-between space, maybe like the place that Luce was during yesterday's life. I don't know, there's a lot of speculation surrounding him, and I'm not the kind of person who can really delve deep into the theory side of things. I think it's just the character itself that I'm just not a big fan of. But other than those things, this was a really good episode. Season 2 really is just the season of backstory at this point, and it was cool getting some more insight into how Belos has been planning all of this, and how long he's been planning all of this for as well. And the reason for all of it is simply because he's a witch hunter, which seems so obvious when you think about it for the main antagonist in a show about witches. I mean, I was mostly joking earlier, but yeah, he's from 17th century England, it adds up. You know the ruins that we were shown on the knee in Adventures in the Elements? Yeah, that was a city that Belos destroyed and blamed on wild magic in order to trick the inhabitants into being on his side, who he then attempts to kill. And while the sigils don't actually kill them, just paralyze them, it's pretty heavily implied that they all froze to death not long after that. Jeez, what was I saying before about this show being dark? But then there's also the added layer of what happened between him and his brother. It's never mentioned by any character during this episode, but the creators of the show are well aware that fans will look for anything and everything in the background to support their theories. So I love that you can basically piece together the entire story of Philip and his brother just from the various paintings shown throughout the episode. They were both brought to the demon realm, which we already knew, and it appears as though the brother maybe fell in love with a witch. Some people have speculated that they may have been a descendant of Ida. That's not right, is it? Wouldn't Ida be a descendant of them? Should I just say ancestor? Some people have speculated that they may have been an ancestor of Ida, thus explaining why the original portal door was buried not far from the Clawthorn residence. I don't mind that theory. I mean, it does seem a little bit forced, but it doesn't go against the whole, like, spitting in the face of destiny thing I keep talking about that is the crux of the whole show. The only relation that has to Luce is that she lives in Gravesfield, as did Philip and his brother, which is likely why the original portal door was tethered to this old abandoned house not far from Luce's house. But that's it. Please stop trying to connect anything and everything together. Sometimes things are just coincidences, and that's fine. But yeah, Philip just straight up murdered his own brother. How this show doesn't fit the Disney brand, I've no idea. And then proceeded to artificially recreate his brother to be, in his words, a better version. And every time these Grimwalkers inevitably betrayed him, he'd just kill them and try again. So Hunter is just the latest in a long line of Witterbane clones. It's not clear whether Hunter actually understands this yet, but he definitely knows Belos is not who he says he is. And it was really well done how Hunter spends most of the episode in just complete denial, but slowly but surely has that broken down to the point where he can't deny it anymore. And as soon as he starts to retaliate a little, Belos is just immediately done with him. Time to make a new Grimwalker, I guess. And, I mean, I know they would never do this, but can you imagine just for a second that this was actually the last time we ever saw Hunter in the show? It'd be awful, I know, but part of me would actually really admire the courage of the writers to do that. Honestly, knowing that we were going to get more Belos backstory, I was half expecting this episode to attempt to redeem Belos a little. You know, maybe like show us his good side, or that he's just a pawn in someone else's game. But no, Belos is literally just an evil guy who literally just wants to kill everyone in the demon realm. Some people are simply beyond redemption. I did like the twist that the grotesque monster thing chasing them was actually an amalgamation of all the palisman Belos had absorbed, and that the little kid was actually the inner Belos and was with them the entire time. And you don't really notice it on a first viewing because of how much else is going on, but Belos is basically going through his own memories, not to show Luce and Hunter who he really is, but to gather items to use against the amalgamation.
Lamp oil, rope, bombs? You want it? It's yours, my friend.
But to be fair, when Luce asks him to show them who Belos really is and he just silently nods, he does end up doing exactly that, just maybe not in the way Luce was expecting. And so thankfully, it is now 115% absolutely, undisputably, completely confirmed that Philip and Belos are the same person. There's no leeway whatsoever on that anymore, thank God for that. It did surprise me that Belos did in fact remember meeting Luce, so okay fine, I was wrong about that. I mean, is that the whole the Emperor is looking forward to meeting you thing cleared up now? If it is, I'll be honest, I'm a bit disappointed. That was a pretty dumb way to set up and resolve that mystery. I still stand by that their initial meeting and subsequent punching of the face by Lilith did not in any way cause Belos' hatred of witches or his vendetta, because that would just be even dumber than the throwaway terror line. Seriously, why do people still think that Luce caused all of this to happen when she went back in time? She did not. She helped him, yes, but with a plan he'd already concocted and killed probably dozens of witches, dozens of palismen, and his own brother already to fulfill. This is not Luce's fault. But nevertheless, Luce did help Philip in the past, and she no doubt feels incredibly guilty about that. And as for Hunter, well, he has a total panic attack once they're out of the mindscape, which was really well performed and kind of difficult to watch. So really, with everything that went down in this episode, it's now properly hit me that we are really close to the end of this show. Things really do be ramping up, you know? Well, let's get right into it. This episode barely had enough time to breathe. Why should I be afforded the luxury? So King, this little guy, this King right here, he is a friggin' Titan. What? From what I can remember, King being a Titan is like one of the earliest fan theories that arose, like really early on in the show's life. And I think after a while, it was just kind of brushed to the side. Like, it's an interesting thought, but it's probably not where they're going. And it was just kind of left to gather dust. And now all of a sudden, boom, King is revealed to be a Titan. And I love the way they did the reveal as well. They sort of did it in two parts. The first part was like Bill talking about the last time he encountered a Titan. He says they have ravenous appetites, terrible cries, the children act like monarchs, and they go, wah. At that point, I had to pause the episode and just ponder some things. So, they're telling us right now that not only is King a Titan, he's also the last remaining Titan alive? But how does that make any sense? Everyone on this island looks like King. How can King be the only Titan? These guys are clearly all members of his species. And then, I had a light bulb moment. Wait, what if... Let me just throw this out there. It's probably wrong, but I'll just say it and then we'll just put a pin in it. What if all of these guys are just wearing the skulls of dead Titans? Imagine that. That would be insane. I mean, again, I don't think that's what's
You like our disguises? Gotta look like a Titan to trap one. Say, who's your buddy's tailor? His costume looks so real.
So as it turns out, none of these people are members of King's species. Even the big guy, Tarek, who we've seen glimpses of since all the way back in Ida's Requiem. They're all just dressed as Titans. And when Tarek said to King about his father passing down that handsome skull of his, he didn't mean genetically passing it down. Side note, I kind of wish that Tarek didn't repeat that same line later on in the episode after the reveal. I think I would have preferred it to stay as one of those, you know, like you only get it on a second viewing kind of things, rather than the show spelling it out for us and saying, you remember how he said this earlier? Well, that's actually what he meant. You understand? You get it now? He meant like passing it down to King as like an object, a gift for King to wear on his head, you know, which would otherwise not have a visible skull on it, presumably. That's what he meant. Sorry, I took that too far. But this could also mean that those murals that we saw in Echoes of the Past were probably depicting Titan trappers fighting Titans. And not only that, but Titans grow up to be enormous creatures. I mean, hell, the entire Boiling Isles was built on the carcass of one of them. which means that all of the skulls that these guys are wearing on their heads were from young Titans. I mean, either that or they're fake skulls, but we do see actual small Titan skulls in the Collector Shrine, so they're certainly not beyond killing the young ones either way. And there's even a couple hints to this earlier on in the episode. I mean, granted, before Luce and Hooty find the shrine, the only Titan bones that we see are from different variants of Titans, you know, ones that don't really look like King. They're just like these big reptile-looking mofos. And the island itself is built on the remains of a different kind as well. And also, this is, by the way, likely the same island that we saw in Ida's dream sequence back in Knock Knock Knockin' on Hooty's Door, which, fittingly enough, was the first time we ever saw the Collector. And so while all of these skeletons are of different Titan variants to King and the Trappers, did no one question why, during King's Titan Trapper preparation montage thing, they had him hit a piñata that looked like they did? And by no one, I mean none of us, the audience. I mean, Luce and Hooty weren't there, and King's young, naive mind probably saw this all as a celebration anyway. Which kind of begs another question. How old is King, exactly? I know a lot of people have been assuming that he's 8, based on Ida's line from Echoes of the Past, where she said she found him 8 years ago. But he wasn't a newborn when she found him. I mean, we saw him as a newborn in that same episode. He had clearly grown up a little since he first hatched. And I was going to bring up the whole demon puberty thing, but in hindsight, the only sign of that was King's voice cracking, which may have just been his vocal cords preparing for the whole Dragonborn power or something, you know? Oh, and by the way, does Hooty still have that blood sample? Because even though they used the last of the Titan blood from the key last episode, King is a Titan. So, it's not like that's really going to be a problem anymore, is it? But anyway, discounting the whole puberty thing, Bill, being the elder, is the only one to have encountered a Titan. None of the other Titan trappers have ever seen a live one. I mean, until King arrived, obviously. And if the Collector is telling the truth, and King is the only remaining Titan still alive, then when exactly did his dad die, if he even is dead? King was wanted as the lost son of the Boiling Isles, so are we to assume that the Boiling Isles Titan is King's father? Except King heard his father call out to him when he was still in his egg, but if none of the trappers have seen a Titan except Bill, he must have been gone a pretty long time, especially if he is the Boiling Isles Titan. I mean, that thing's been dead for centuries. So I'm left with 3 possible options. Option 1, King was incubating in his egg for an extremely long time. Option 2, King was living in the temple with Jean-Luc for an extremely long time. And by the way, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Jean-Luc is going to come into play at some point, I guarantee it. There is no way that they just take him out of the temple and have him sit lifelessly in the corner of Luce's room if he wasn't still important somehow. Trust me, this is going to come back. Or option 3 is just that the Collector is lying and there are still other Titans around somewhere. And yeah, speaking of which, I wasn't expecting the Titan Trappers to be worshippers of the Collector. I didn't think this episode would have anything to do with the Collector. Although, they did show him at the beginning of the episode while Luce was telling the others about what happened in Belos' mind. Man, I've got to start taking into account that what's brought up at the start of an episode is probably going to be important later on in the episode. That seems to keep happening. So, it seems as though wherever the Collector is, or was, they were trapped and could only escape through a Titan, maybe? So I'm guessing that maybe that was the initial plan, because even though the Boiling Isles Titan is, you know, kind of dead, we've seen that it still has a beating heart, which, you know, it might be artificially made to keep beating. So maybe the draining spell was designed to pour everyone's magic into reviving the Titan, perhaps, thus freeing the Collector. Except now, maybe it seems like plans have changed. With King being a Titan and an actual living one, the Collector seemingly escaped through him instead. Except, the Collector knew that there was still one living Titan out there, and the Titan Trappers were intending and probably instructed by the Collector to immediately kill King once that whole transfer thing happened. And they didn't. So, what now? Is the Collector in King still? I don't know. I've got so many questions. I've never gone this deep. You know, going into this episode, I was thinking King species, you know, being introduced this late and right in the middle of everything else with Belos going down, they must be a pretty important part of this whole thing. And in a way, I was right. I mean, King species is important, but obviously nobody on this island actually was a member of King species in the first place. So they're probably not important, and we probably won't see any of them again. But King himself? Yeah, looks like he's going to be an extremely key part of the story. No more him just being the comedic side character, writing best-selling novels and traumatizing kids on the playground. I mean, hell, the season 2 finale is literally titled King's Tide, and that's when the Day of Unity begins. We're 4 episodes away from that, and canonically it's in a week's time. And I hate to go ahead and talk about episode structure again, but I did notice that this episode has no B-plot. You know, you can argue semantics about what and what isn't considered a B-plot, and there have been multiple episodes even in this season that haven't had B-plots, like Echoes of the Past, Yesterday's Lie, Them's the Breaks Kid. The reason I noticed it here is because it kind of felt like there was gonna be one, and then there wasn't. I kept expecting it to cut back to Lilith and Ida at the Owl House at some point, and it never did, making this another episode in which Lilith shows up within the first few minutes and then plays no role in the entire rest of the episode. You know, that's not exactly a bad thing, but it got me thinking. And this is purely speculation. I could be easily proven wrong, even as early as next episode, but I do wonder if early drafts of this episode did have a B-plot. Possibly maybe before the show was shortened to 2 seasons and a small nugget of 3. This episode wouldn't have been shoved in the middle of the whole Belos' master plan arc of the season, because other than the, additional reasons to go to this island, along with potentially meeting King's family, needing somewhere to hide from Belos, and possibly enlisting the warriors to help, and of course all the stuff with the Collector, this episode doesn't have all that much to do with that arc. And while, like I mentioned, this episode doesn't have that much room to breathe, maybe if they didn't have to address the events of the last episode right at the beginning of this one, there may have been room for a small B-plot. I don't know. But with the reshuffling of episode order, and Hollow Mind coming directly before this, obviously there had to be some kind of follow-up to that in the very next episode. They couldn't just not address that. And so maybe any B-plot idea, if there even was one to begin with, had to be scrapped for time. I'm really hoping that's not the case, because while it didn't really bother me all that much here, I am really hoping that these last few episodes aren't going to be noticeably crammed together, just so there's enough time for all the plot to happen. Not that that's in any way the show's fault, of course, that's Disney's fault for cancelling a good thing. But, again, it's speculation. I may be wrong about all of that. Maybe the reason we never cut back to Lilith and Ida at the Owl House is because they're not in the Owl House. I don't know. We'll have to see. It ended on a cliffhanger with the Owl House surrounded, and Hootie presumably isn't there. So I'm excited to see what happens. In fact, literally just before I started recording this, Rebecca Rose said that it is one of her favorite cold opens. So I look forward to that. This might be one of my favorite episodes of the entire show. Definitely my favorite of Season 2B so far. This has everything I wanted from an Owl House episode, and it didn't even have the main cast in it. Wait, no, that makes it sound like I don't want the main cast in the show. Obviously, I love Luce, King, and Ida, but it is funny, I wish I'd said this at the time, I genuinely did consider writing it into the script. After Any Sport in a Storm aired, an episode that didn't have King or Ida, and only really had a small B-plot with Luce, I did wonder, imagine if they did an episode without Luce. She's the only character to have been in every single episode, obviously she's the main character. But I didn't think they would actually do it, especially this late into the show, this close to the finale. I mean, the guts to do an entire episode with just the supporting cast. Gotta give props to them for even attempting that, and ultimately succeeding. This episode is amazing, and everyone in it holds it up flawlessly. I appreciate it in the same way as Eclipse Lake. That was an episode that I wasn't the biggest fan of when it first aired. I felt like, especially coming off of the highs of Knock Knock Knocking on Hootie's Door, that it didn't quite live up to the hype. But the more I watched it, the more I appreciated it as a well-written character piece type episode. And it's now one of my favorites. And I feel it a similar way to Labyrinth Runners. Only difference is I recognized how good of an episode it is from the very start. So in the vein of Eclipse Lake, I'll briefly go over the other things first, and then I'll get on to the actual important character stuff after that. So we got introduced to yet another head witch, this time of the Illusionist Coven. And his name is... confusing. He introduces himself as Adrian Gray, but in the credits he's listed as Gray Vernworth. The wiki says his full name is Adrian Gray Vernworth, so what's going on there? Does he have a double-barreled first name, but generally goes by Gray? I don't know. It's weird. And I really like that they played into the fact that we wouldn't know whether to trust him or not. Some Coven leaders are loyal to Belos, and others are secretly not. I gotta say, as evil as it is, him pretending to be secretly helping the students and making them all think that he's tricking the Coven Scouts by giving them fake sigils disguised as real ones, only for him to actually be working with the Coven Scouts and giving them real sigils disguised as fake ones. Pretty smart, honestly. It had me fooled. And I like that he's basically just an asshole director who treats his illusion tricks as performances. He even gets people to play as him, and then when his illusions are seen through, he blames the Scouts for his poor direction.
I want you off the fucking set, you prick!
Sorry.
No, don't just be sorry. Think for 1 fucking second. The fuck are you doing?
And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the big fight. Wait, why are there trees in this hallway? Hadn't Gus stopped the big illusion spell at this point in the episode? Why are there trees here? Unless they were always here. I don't think they were... Oh, they're gone now. Okay. I have to assume that's an animation error. And that's one of the only ones I've noticed myself. There's also that infamous one in the first day where they had Luce in her Hexide track colors right at the start of the episode, even though she didn't get them until the end of that episode. And speaking of, I like that more students are taking multiple Coven tracks now. That's really cool. Emera, along with Illusions, is also taking Healing. Edric, along with Illusions, is also taking Beastkeeping and Potions. And Matty Matt, along with Construction, is also taking Illusions, which is cool. Probably after being impressed with what Gus did in Through the Looking Glass Ruins. Anyway, sorry, I was talking about the fight scene. I got distracted by the pretty colors. Yeah, it's definitely one of the best fight scenes they've done, and with the most amount of participants as well. It's great. I had a huge smile on my face during this whole scene. Every character gets their own little moment, and each one flows so nicely into the next. It's great. Although, where was Boscha? Like, I know this isn't the whole school, but it's basically every character who has a name and a voice, except Boscha. She was in the gym at the start of the episode, but then she's just gone for the entire rest of it. Like, what? Is she okay? Like, did no one think to look for her? Or... I mean, like, even Matty Matt has a bunch of little moments in this episode. I mean, you couldn't have given maybe one of his lines to Boscha or something? But let's move on to the characters that we actually care about, and I'll start with Willow and Amity. You see? I told you that there was some unresolved tension between these two. Ha! I was right. No words for my dinner today. And what that unresolved tension is that Amity doesn't see Willow for who she really is. And I like that you can kind of understand it from both sides too. The two of them have only recently started hanging out again, and Amity doesn't want to lose her as a friend again. And so she feels the need to protect Willow, probably as some way to make up for how much she used to pick on her in the past. The problem with that is by doing so, she's admitting that she still sees Willow as the weak, timid girl who gets picked on that she used to be. By being overprotective of Willow, she's making Willow feel like she's someone who needs protecting. But that's not who Willow is anymore. She's a different person now, and she can look after herself. So yeah, it was nice that the two of them resolved that. It was a little quick, yeah. I mean, it could have done with like an actual conversation between them, but it worked fine. I don't blame the show. They don't have much time left. I absolutely loved the moment where Gray tried to trick Gus and Hunter with an illusion of Willow, and how Hunter saw through the illusion, but Gus didn't. Because you'd think it would be the other way around. Like, not only was Gus the only person to see through Gray's trick at the beginning of the episode, but Gus has known Willow for years. Hunter's known Willow for about a day, but it makes perfect sense. Near the beginning of the episode, Gus and Willow have this little exchange when talking about Amity.
She needs time to get to know the new me.
You mean the real you?
And yet, despite Gus saying this, he didn't notice this fake Willow was acting like the old Willow. She even called him Augustus, and he didn't bat an eye. And I think it's like an unconscious bias thing. Like, even though Gus is actively being supportive of Willow, there's still a small part of his brain that, like Amity, still sees Willow as who she used to be rather than who she is. He's not doing it on purpose, like I said, it's an unconscious thing. And realistically, he's known the old Willow a lot longer than he's known the new Willow, the real Willow. Ironically, because of that, he was tricked by it so easily. Whereas Hunter has only ever met the real Willow. He didn't know Willow when she was timid and fearful, so of course this Willow is immediately acting out of character to him. It's genuinely impressive character writing. I love this so much. Also, I love that Hunter still calls Willow Captain. That's just a really cute thing that carried over from any sport. And it makes sense because Hunter respects figures of authority, which is why it was so hard for him to run away from Belos and the Emperor's Coven. And he can barely even accept that himself. Like he says, there's still a small part of him that wants to believe in all the lies that Belos told him. And Gus not recognizing the fake Willow leads neatly into his kind of internal conflict at the end of the episode. Because this seems to be a recurring problem for Gus, being tricked by someone he thought to be his friend, but who actually had an ulterior motive. In retrospect, it makes sense why he was so skeptical of Hunter at the start of Any Sport in a Storm, made worse by the fact that Hunter actually did have an ulterior motive in that episode. But it also happened with the Glandis students in Through the Looking Glass Ruins, and you could even argue it happened with Matty Mattison in Something Ventured, Someone Framed, even if that was for only a couple minutes. But it gets to the point where he starts to question his own judgment. And I love that Hunter can relate to that. He gets through to Gus in the end by opening up to him about everything that he's had to deal with recently, and whether he can trust his own judgment. And it's such a good parallel to earlier in the episode, when they're also in Gus's bedroom, or an illusion of it at least, and Gus tries to get Hunter to open up, and he's not ready to. But they help each other in the same ways. It's really good. Even just like the layout of this, with them each sitting on different sides of each other in both scenes. It's really well done. Thank God, I adore this episode. Seriously, it's like an amazingly written episode. I mean, most of them have been, really. Season 2 has not let up once thus far. And if they keep this going for the final 3 episodes, we'll have something really special. And we've now seen everything from that initial promo trailer. In fact, I think the only piece of promotional material we've yet to see is Steve on a motorcycle. Where is that? When are we getting that? Where's Steve? That's the real question. This next episode will be the hunt for Steve. There's Steve. Oh my god, we got a full intro. If this is the last full intro that we get, I don't care. We got it one more time, and they didn't flippin' change Willow's design, god damn it. Didn't really know what to expect from this one for the most part. I know it has done a little bit for a while now, but this really feels like we're in the end game now. Everything seems to be coming to a head. No pun intended. So one side of this episode is with the aforementioned main man, Steve, riding around with King as they both come to terms with their wants changing. Steve no longer wants to be a Coven Scout, and King, now knowing he's like a demon Jesus, realizes that he doesn't actually want power and to be respected and feared by people. It's a really interesting aspect. Like, King, for the entire show, since the very beginning, he has wanted to have authority, and now that he, for the first time, kind of has that, he's realized that he just wants to be treated normally. He doesn't want that. Like Steve says, wants can change, and so can people. Oh, and I wasn't actually going to bring up Steve's face reveal, as it kind of speaks for itself, or the fact that he kind of looks a bit like Mr. M. Matty Matt Matterson, but it actually was confirmed by Dana, like a couple hours ago, in fact, that they were intended to be brothers. So that's cool. Oh, and something else I've been meaning to bring up for a while now, but couldn't really find a good place to do so. Like, the Elsewhere and Elsewhen section was already really long, and Lilith hadn't really appeared in another episode a sufficient amount for me to justify going on a tangent about her. But yeah, going off topic just a little bit, I just wanted to say how cool it is that Lilith was confirmed to be asexual. Not in the show directly, but it was heavily hinted at in one of those little audio recordings by the voice actors that were played during Dana's charity livestream a while ago that I played a little clip from at the start of the video. But it was outright confirmed not long after that by Sissy Jones. Pretty epic. And I forget if it was before or after. I think it was like about a week or so after. The YouTuber Jaden Animations, she came out with a video, pun intended, stating that she herself is Arrow Ace. I'm not a super avid viewer of Jaden, but someone linked me the video and I watched it, and I genuinely struggle to think of a single video I've ever seen that I've related to more than that video. And I would highly recommend it, especially if you're someone who is not well versed on the topic of asexuality. And, you know, based on the amount of hate that was thrown at Jaden after she posted that video, it's pretty clear that a lot of people simply aren't educated on this stuff. And I don't really blame them. I blame them for the hateful stuff, obviously. Like, it's really not difficult to just, like, be nice and respectful. Like, I don't know why so many people struggle with that, but not for the lack of education, because, I mean, I didn't get taught this stuff. I had to figure that stuff out myself. But yeah, I just wanted to say that, and I just wanted to make sure that I kind of brought that whole thing up at some point during this video. But yeah, back to the actual show. The other side of this episode is Luce and Ida on a mission to retrieve the items that were stolen from the Owl House, which was, at first, just so Ida could give Luce one last fun thing to do before, you know, everything goes to mush.
Wouldn't you rather, I don't know, have a beach day?
Maybe if we had time for 20 more adventures, but we don't.
But she ends up finding a way to talk to Rain and realizes that she might be able to get Luce and King out of and away from the mush completely, because Ida actually has no plan and no means of stopping Bellows whatsoever, and she would rather not tell Luce that if it means that she can keep her safe. But because Luce thinks there is a plan, all she sees is Ida trying to send her away, which is kind of reminiscent of the very first episode, when Luce felt as though her mother was sending her away. And this leads into a fight scene between Luce and Ida, which, you know, it definitely isn't the best one the show's done, but it's probably the one with the most emotional weight to it. But then the two of them end up getting captured at the end anyway. And I'm sure I can't be the only one who was fully expecting the episode to end on like a traumatic cliffhanger. I mean, they even kind of teased that it was going to be another like rescue Ida from a petrification type deal. So it was just such a nice surprise that it actually ended on a pretty optimistic note. I mean, things are still dire, yes. The Day of Unity is in 2 days, but at least now we have hope. We have a team. And most importantly, a plan. You know, a word I bring up a lot when writing these is parallel. This show is very good with parallels, usually between two different scenarios or characters, and having them collide in a meaningful way. I realize parallels don't collide, that's why they're parallels, but you get what I mean. So the whole thing with Rain purposely leaving Ida out of their plan and not telling her anything as a means to keep her safe, I mean, do I need to explain that one? Man, it's gonna be so awesome when we have like all the heroes together at once. I feel like a common mistake in TV shows and movies and video games is having the villains be the most interesting character. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have an interesting villain, it's good, but not when it makes the heroes look incredibly dull in comparison. But that is something that you definitely cannot say for the Owl House. No siree. I mean, we've got all of these interesting, like, good guys, and then, like, who are the bad guys? some flipping Cheshire cat that's like actually desperately lonely and a flipping witch racist. And it looks like Luce is finally going to be carving her palisman. So, last minute predictions on what it's going to be? I think the main consensus is that it's going to be a bat. She has a bat phone, her Tamagotchi icon is a bat. In her beta design, she has a bat. I mean, it's a different kind of bat, but second choice would be snake. I don't know, for the sake of diplomacy, I'll go down the middle and say that it's going to be a snake bat. Or a snat. Wow, only 5 minutes in and I've already said all I want to say on this episode. I guess that makes sense. I mean, a lot of this episode was kind of payoff and or setup, but I still thought I'd have a little more to say on it. I mean, leaving it here almost makes it seem like it was a somewhat uneventful episode, which it certainly wasn't. Or that me having less to say about it than other episodes kind of implies that I'm not as impressed with it. I don't know, maybe it's just that I had specific aspects of previous episodes that I was able to go on major tangents that took up a good chunk of those sections. Or perhaps it's just that this episode mostly speaks for itself and that me recounting all that happened it would be somewhat redundant if you've seen the episode. After all, I only spoke about Them's the Breaks Kid for a measly 4.5 minutes, and yet I don't feel as though I didn't adequately cover that episode. Perhaps it's just that this episode, being so close to the finale, kind of seems like it deserves a more thorough coverage. I'm probably going to have a lot to say on these final 2 episodes, but then if I do end up in the same situation of not having much to say on it, I'm not going to be able to go on a long monologue about not having much to say on it like I am right now. In hindsight, this dilemma has actually ended up prolonging this section to nearly 6 minutes. I mean, it now feels like an acceptable length compared to the others, but if I'm not actually talking about the episode, then I mean, is it really worth it? Wouldn't it have been better if I just ended the section on Snat rather than needlessly padding it out for no real purpose at all? But of course, if I do end up rambling even more about So since Season 1 had only 19 episodes, that means we've now had more Season 2 than Season 1. Think about that for a second. I've watched more of this show live than I have as catch-up. That's crazy. You can never accurately predict what's going to happen in an Owl House episode, but you can usually get a vague idea of what the episode's going to focus on based on the title and or description, or whatever promo images are shown in the week leading up to it. Not really the case here. Vague-ass title, vague-ass description, nobody had a damn clue what this episode was going to be. And I quite like that. I'm very happy with what we got for this penultimate episode. Very, very happy. So, should we just go ahead and cut to the chase? The obvious highlight of this episode, the thing that everybody's talking about that happened in this episode, the Luce and Hunter switching places twist. That was really well done, I've got to say. And there were so many little hints throughout the entire fight scene, but because it's such a chaotic scene, you don't notice any of them. I mean, first off, there's the fact that Luce does Hunter's mad dash ability, which I did see on my first viewing, but all I really saw was just a flash of yellow, and I didn't register that that was actually Luce doing that. I mean, it wasn't Luce, it was Hunter disguised as Luce, obviously. Then there's Hunter mocking Kikimora as he gets captured by her, which he absolutely would not do in this situation. He's terrified of getting taken back to Bellows. And there's this little moment just after Hunter gets after Luce gets taken, that Hunter checks to make sure that he's Luce, that he's... I'm getting confused. There's also the fact that you can see Gus's magic rings around his wrist the whole time performing the illusion. Also, keep in mind that Gus also does another illusion on top of this. Jesus Christ, Gus. And there's the fact that neither Luce or Hunter say a word during this entire scene. But nobody noticed any of that, or at least not many. Probably some people picked up on something, but still, flawlessly pulled off. So with that out of the way, you know, I was originally going to keep the joke going. I was going to keep teasing that I would talk about the kiss, but then actually talk about a different aspect of the episode, and then at the end I would just say, oh, and Luce and Amity kissed before moving on to the finale, but I'm not going to do that. No one wants that, and I actually do want to talk about it, give a spotlight to it. You know, it's funny, you'll sometimes hear people say something along the lines of, and like, I understand the mentality, but they'll say stuff like, we shouldn't make this a big deal. If we make it a big deal, it becomes harder to normalize it. We should just treat it like it's not a big deal, and it will normalize it quicker. And it's like, I get what you're saying,
but it is a big deal. I have to tell someone.
And see, I knew it. I told you it would be before the finale, 1 episode off from the finale, but still. And this really felt like the perfect time for it as well. The two of them have been apart for quite a while now, and Luce goes on this little rescue mission, climbs up to a balcony. All of it was just great. It was just lovely.
Oh, hot diggity dog. Oh no! Now the thing I said right after we kissed will always be hot diggity dog.
And also the sudden shift to ridiculously fluid animation is a little jarring, yeah, but I think it worked. I think this is quite possibly the smoothest animation that this show has ever had. I mean, it almost looks like a completely different show. It's very bizarre, yeah, but it's still a wonderful moment. Speaking of looking like a different show, who the hell are these guys? Like, what the actual... Okay, I looked it up. They're all references to K-pop artists, apparently. And I knew that Amity would be the one to make the move as well. Thinking about it now, she's pretty much always been the instigator. She was the first one to have the crush. She wanted to ask Luce to grum. She kissed Luce on the cheek first. She technically asked Luce out first, because she jumped the gun, even though she did let Luce do it properly after. She let loose. But it's still crazy that this even exists in a Disney show of all things. It shouldn't be crazy, but it is. And I don't know how many people will agree with this, but it didn't seem like there was quite as much talk around this. There was a hell of a lot of talk, don't get me wrong. People were talking about this, definitely. But it didn't seem like it was quite as much as the initial cheek kiss back in Through the Looking Glass Ruins. And I think the reason for that is because, let's be real, we all kind of knew that this was coming eventually. There's no way that they were not going to do this. There was so much build up to it that when it happened, it was less of a shock and more just a relief. Like, thank God they finally got that in there. But of course they would. After everything Disney's put up against Dana and the crew that they've had to push through so far, there's no way in hell they were going to back down on this. And it just all came together in just a beautiful moment. Oh, and hey, when this video comes out, it'll be June. So, happy Pride Month. Right, sorry, I was just watching that again on the little screen up there. Yeah, just switch to a different clip, please. Come on, we need to move on. The flippin' tease of Lucy's palisman, man. I mean, we were all expecting to see what animal she carved, and then she just goes and carves an egg. It's a cute idea, yeah, letting it choose what it wants to be. But it basically just means that now we have to wait even longer to see what it hatches into. And I know people have been saying, well, it can't be a bat now then. It's got to be a bird or a reptile or something. And, like, you realize this is the Boiling Isles. Knowing it's going to hatch from an egg does not narrow it down in the slightest. Moving on to Amity's parents, I didn't think we'd get such an explicit conflict between the two of them, or that Alador would actually grow further and realize that what he's been doing is wrong. Yeah, he's been neglectful and complicit, but he's trying to do better, which is definitely not something that you can say for Odalia. All she cares about is the family name, the family business, but not the family itself. I do appreciate how adamant this show is that while some people are, misjudged and or can be redeemed, others simply cannot and do not deserve to be. Odalia, in the entire time she's been on screen, has been dreadful, and she doesn't intend to change that. And she's very, very frustrating to watch as well. I know people who will like this, maybe not to this extreme, but I hate that she never feels a single ounce of regret for her actions, and no one can get through to her. No matter what anyone says or does, she doesn't budge at all, and it's infuriating. So, I mean, good riddance, honestly, and good for Alador. Also, what was with the rat that looked like Alador? Like, what the hell was that about? Was that, I don't know what that was. Was that just a one-off gag? Does Alador have lab rats that he just dresses up as himself, or is Alador secretly a rat? I have no idea what that was. I thought that was something, and then it just went nowhere. I mean, Alador's in the next scene with King, so was that just nothing? Are they never going to address that? I don't have all that much to say on the cat's side of the episode, as a lot of that was just set up, but I do want to say how tightly knit the idea of Ida's curse being the thing that's presumably going to stop the draining spell is. Something that was established in the 4th ever episode, was a major factor in the first season and elaborated on in the second. For that to be the solution to the problem is really a stroke of genius. And while we know that Belos knows about the plan, we don't know how he knows. I know that people have been speculating that one of the cats is like a double agent or something, but I don't know. I kind of doubt that. I certainly don't think it's Rain, if anyone. I think all the, concerned shots from them was purely worry for Ida's safety. I mean, especially after promising to Luce that they would protect her. We never actually saw Ida get the sigil, so I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. Honestly, there's so much going on right now. So much happened in this one episode. It's honestly super impressive that they were able to fit it all in. I mean, compare this to Edge of the World, which just feels so barren and stagnant in comparison. There were over 20 characters in this episode, which is a ridiculous amount for a single episode. But not once did it feel like any of them were sidelined or overshadowed. But there are so many loose threads now, and I don't know what's going to be wrapped up next week and what's going to carry over into season 3. There's no way all of this is going to be resolved in one final episode. But obviously the final episode will have some finality to it, but there's just so much happening. I don't know. I mean, I haven't even mentioned King's visions these past couple episodes, hearing the collector's voice and all that. I mean, clearly the two of them are linked somehow, so I'm curious what part that's going to play. I mean, honestly, King's part in this episode feels like it's going to be continued heavily, like this is part 1 of 2, because he wants to help somehow, and no one's really letting him, so he's for sure going to be a key player next episode. And with that, I guess it's time to move on to the episode in question. The Season 2 finale, King's Tide. Here we go. It's strange how even though it's literally exactly the same time between each episode, to me at least, the time between Labyrinth Runners and O Titan, Where Art Thou felt like only a couple days. Waiting for this episode felt like forever. Seriously, I was like, is it time for the next episode yet? No, it's Tuesday. Well, this was certainly something. I'll be frank, this isn't the greatest episode of the show. It's far from my favourite episode, but boy was it a ride from start to finish, and a brilliant cap-off to Season 2. I still have not emotionally recovered from this episode yet. I swear this show genuinely affects me in ways that I never really believed a TV show could. Like, reaching out took me a day or two to get out of the headspace of. It's May 31st as I record this, and I can still feel the weight of King's Tide. This episode has such a different vibe to it compared to pretty much every episode that came before it. I don't really know how to describe it. It's, you know when you watch seasons of a TV show and then they make a movie, and you watch the movie, and even though you know, like, it's the same characters, same writers and everything, it feels different. It's grander. That's what King's Tide feels like, and it's just a regular length episode. I mean, I know it's the season finale, but I mean, even Youngblood Old Souls wasn't even close to this level of epic. So I guess I'll just make my way through it. I won't go over every aspect of it, because admittedly it is a little slow in the first half. The second half more than makes up for it, though. I did like the little Coven's Head battle, as short as it was, and I was, for a short moment, wondering if, after it was found out that Rain was Ida in disguise and their whole plan fell apart, if they were going to pull out some Rain and Lilith secretly switched places and have Lilith corrupt the spell, you know, make up for what she did. But actually, in hindsight, that wouldn't have really made sense. I mean, it was established that Lilith doesn't have as much control over her curse compared to Ida. And from a storytelling perspective, I mean, it really did need to be King who ultimately saved the day this time. Like I said, his little arc over the past couple episodes of wanting to help but not being able to perfectly closed off here. He needed the right opportunity. So the draining spell begins, and Philip just leaves. He just leaves. I mean, it seems so crazy to me now, having spent all of this time thinking that Belos had this super complex master plan, when really, the whole time, he was just gonna kill as many witches as he could at once, and then go home. Like, that was it. He got people to join covens, not so he could bring order or eradicate wild magic or anything, but just so he could take as many of them out in one swoop as he could. He rebuilt the portal, not for any kind of unity between the human realm and the demon realm, but just so he could dip the second the spell started. He spent centuries keeping himself alive by consuming palisman, constantly creating and subsequently killing clones of his brother whom he murdered, and manipulating a literal god into doing all the work for him, just to never fulfill his promise and discard the collector as soon as they'd done their part. What a dick! And like Luce says to him, when he gets home, no one's even going to believe him. Things have changed a lot since he's been gone. I mean, all of this wasn't really worth much at all. So she makes him a deal. She'll help him fit back into society and boast about his accomplishments and stuff back in the human realm if he saves her friends, which is actually a believable deal that Luce would make. So that was really smart. Like, I think Philip does actually think she means that. And I really like the old bait and switch with Luce branding Philip with a sigil. She went for a handshake, but had her other hand behind her back. And, you know, Philip's not stupid, so she shows him her other hand, and there's nothing there. So they shake, and it turns out that she was able to make the glove invisible. But even then, with the draining spell already started and slowly killing everyone with a sigil, which is a large majority of everyone on the Isles, all the Coven heads, Kikimora, Alador, Hunter, and Ida, and now Philip, he still doesn't stop. I mean, it is explained that he actually can't stop it, but if he could, I kind of doubt he even would. This is his life's work. I mean, I'm betting he would genuinely be willing to die if it meant that he succeeded. Also, I've really got to bring up the little scene after the ship is shot down. You see it all from King's point of view as he just drifts in and out of consciousness, and all you can hear is like muffled voices and just genuine screams of terror from people. Like, hundreds of people are literally just dying, and no one can do anything about it. Yeah, I mean, you really feel how serious all of this is in that moment. Anyway, Amity, Willow, Gus, Hunter, and King all make their way to Luce, and the 5 teens do their best to take down Belos, really getting a chance to showcase all of their respective combat skills. Oh, and yeah, it was basically confirmed that Philip's brother's name was Caleb, and Flapjack was his palisman. After getting one last attempt at appealing to Hunter, Philip sees the palisman, shouts, and goes berserk. I did hear that was incorrectly subtitled as kill him for some people, leading to a lot of confusion over what he said, but okay, come on people, he said Caleb. It does not sound like kill him, unless Belos randomly adopted a different accent for a second. Why would he even say kill him? That doesn't make any sense. Who would he be saying that to? Subtitles are wrong sometimes. He said Caleb, you know it. But this is when King finds his opportunity to to help. And this entire scene building up to the Collector being released is so amazingly done. I mean, the last 7 or 8 minutes of this episode, I've rewatched way more times than the entire rest of the episode. I can't get over how amazing the whole build-up sequence is. Rain fulfills their promise to Luce by saving Ida by literally ripping her arm off. You know, come to think of it, this episode has a lot to do with promises. The only way that King can free the Collector is by promising that he'll play with him.
I do not associate with figures.
I mean, he tries to just beg him to help, but ultimately the Collector is a child. Not just a child, but a child with godlike powers and no real sense of empathy. I mean, you can't really make an appeal to someone like that. And there's a reason that King's dad locked him away in the first place. And just like that, the Collector is free. And you know what? I'm just going to play the scene again, because it's so good, and me just explaining it does not do it justice.
What you playing?
Collector. You're free, just as promised.
As promised? I remember someone throwing me off a bridge. I'm not angry, though. Say, you want to play tag? I'm it.
I really do wonder where the whole idea came from that the Collector was going to possess Luce or something. I mean, was it simply just that they looked a little bit like Luce? You know, got a similar kind of hairstyle? I don't know. I never believed that. I don't know why so many people did. I don't know why so many people treated it like it was almost a definite thing that was definitely going to happen. I don't know, sometimes I think this fandom has a bit of a small issue with running with the popular theories like they're facts. Like, just watch the show. Like, appreciate what it's doing, not what you want it to do. But yeah, this is just what the Collector actually looks like. And he's kind of adorable, and I don't really, it's weird. Like, this is genuinely like a really great character design. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and completely rule out the possibility that there may possibly be a potential actual reason that the two look similar, but I mean, that's for season 3 to go into if it wants to. And you know, I've been pretty clear that I was not a big fan of the Collector at all. I mean, similar to Hunter, I just didn't really get that initial appeal that so many others seem to get instantly. I mean, over time, Hunter's character definitely grew on me, and now I love him. But when it comes to the Collector, I don't think I've ever had a more sudden, unexpected, rapid change of opinion on anything in my life. In this one scene, my view on the Collector just did a complete 180. I love this character now. And he just kills Bellows. Just like that. Emperor Bellows. Over the course of 2 seasons, well, I mean 1 and a bit, he wasn't really mentioned until the tail end of season 1. He was set up to be like the most dangerous, biggest threat to the Boiling Isles. After countless attempts and battles, nobody could even get a scratch on him. The Collector shows up, and within about 20 seconds just obliterates him with a single touch. I mean, they really just completely put the Collector over right here. It's terrifying, and it's awesome. And then, to stop the draining spell, he just moves the moon. He just straight up just drags it across the sky with his finger, and problem solved. It's insane. I mean, I'm more than completely sold on the Collector now, and with them shaping up to potentially be the new villain, like for season 3, I'm more than looking forward to that. And even though the others could escape through the portal, King had to keep his promise and stay behind with the Collector, and indulge in the chaos that he's creating. I mean, I couldn't for a second even begin to predict what they have in store for the final season. Also, I really do need to take a moment to give special attention to the soundtrack of this episode. Brad Breek, who's composed the score for the entirety of Season 2, has been releasing all of it here on YouTube, and you can tell that he went all out for this one. Everything from A Game Called The Owl House onwards really is just pure gold in audio form. I mean, you already heard a little bit of the Collector's music in that clip I played, and that's great. They're just the complete tonal contrast to the seriousness of the situation. That weird, cool, funky sound, which leans just on the side of unsettling, so you don't really know how to feel about it. It fits the character perfectly. And the climactic build-up of the Collector being released is an incredible piece. I didn't catch it the first time, but a lot of people pointed out that during this scene with Rain saving Ida, you can actually hear the Ida's Requiem melody in there. That gives me chills. That's so good. A bit more obviously, an epic rendition of the show's theme song can be heard as everyone's escaping through the portal door. And then, of course, you finish with the gentle, melancholy home, as Luce, Amity, Willow, Gus, and Hunter are now trapped in the human realm. I mean, it's crazy. Luce spent the entirety of this season trying to find a way back home, and now she is, in the worst way possible. All 5 of them, all emotionally and physically scarred and completely stuck with seemingly no way to help at all, which you just know is gonna drive Luce insane. One of Luce's most defining traits is her selflessness, her almost inability to not help the people she cares about, even if it means putting herself in danger. I mean, hell, she was willing to stay behind as the Collector was literally warping and destroying the world around her, just to make sure her friends were safe. And now, even though she's with her close friends, her girlfriend, her mother, she knows that Ida and King are in danger, and she can do nothing about it. What a devastating but incredible place to finish. And now we go into Season 3 with our main heroes in the human realm. Where have I heard that before? Oh yeah, The Good Place. Oh, but seriously, I still haven't gone around to Amphibia yet, as much as my Twitter timeline has been bombarded with it the past few months. I mean, I retweet a couple Owl House things and Twitter thinks, oh, you watch Owl House? You must also watch Amphibia. Here's some spoilers that mean nothing to you. As if I can focus on 2 shows at once. I don't have the emotional stability for that. I don't know, maybe I'll check it out now that we're on hiatus again. But honestly, I'm really looking forward to Season 3, not because of all the Collector stuff, but just to see these 5 in the human realm. I mean, that's gonna be awesome. That's what I'm really looking forward to. But yeah, who knows when that will be. I mean, I've heard rumors that Season 3 might be as soon as October this year, but I've not seen any confirmation on that as of yet. But with that, Season 2 comes to a close. That's it. And it was an incredible ride, from start to finish. And that was Season 2. Overall thoughts? Yeah, I quite liked it. If you want me to run down all 21 episodes from least to most favorite, here you go. But in all seriousness, I will say that the second half didn't have quite as many that just completely knocked it out of the park as the first half did, but there was never a dull moment throughout. I was excited for each and every new installment of the show. And like last time, I'm gonna miss it for a while now that we're back on hiatus. But I am a little relieved that I can put it to one side now and focus on other things. I mean no exaggeration when I say that I spent multiple Friday nights dreaming about watching this show, to the point where, and this is 100% true, this is a true story, I'm not making this up, this genuinely happened. On the night before Edge of the World aired, I said out loud to myself, okay brain, could you maybe not dream about watching the Owl House tonight? Thinking that if I say it out loud, then the idea leaves my subconscious mind and enters my conscious mind, and it'd be pretty insane if I still end up dreaming about it now. That night, and again, this is 100% true, I dreamt specifically about not watching it. I literally had a dream where I wanted to watch the episode and things kept getting in the way or distracting me so I couldn't get around to it. I think that probably gives you some idea of how consumed I've been by this recently. I mean, it's why I haven't had all that many videos out for a while, so I am relieved to let it go for a little while. How long? I don't know. Again, I've not heard any confirmation on when Season 3 comes out, but I know it'll be worth the wait. And I do really hope that people don't go into it with this mentality of like, oh, if only it was a full season, it's so disappointing. Yeah, it's disappointing, but it's not going to take away from it. You know, why dwell on that? It's still going to be something that the crew have poured their hearts into, and I'm sure it'll be amazing. Limitations breed innovation. I mean, would you say that Season 2 suffered because of the cancellation? I mean, sure, yeah, I mentioned a couple things that felt like they'd been rejigged from what they originally were, but I mean, that was all speculation anyway. Could we have gotten something better if there was more time? Who can say, really? Does it even matter anyway? What we got was amazing. I mean, in fact, you could probably make a case that Season 2 worked so well because of how much they had to fit into 21 episodes. It meant that every second mattered. No time was wasted because there was no time to waste. And you can really feel that with Season 2, and I'd argue it's one of its strengths, and why it worked much better than Season 1 did. Again, I didn't dislike Season 1 by any stretch, but in hindsight, it is kind of run-of-the-mill and doesn't offer up notably more than most other shows, aside from maybe the gay stuff. And like I mentioned at the beginning, it does drag a little in the middle. I mean, after Convention, it kind of all blurs together in my mind up until Understanding Willio. I mean, I literally have to use the acronym, A Witch Loses a True Way, just to remember the episode order. And even then, there's 2 S's right near each other, and I always forget whether it's Sense and Insensitivity first or Something Ventured Someone Framed first. But that is not the case for Season 2. I can list all 21 episodes without hesitation and without using the acronym, because each and every individual episode of this season is such a vitally important stepping stone in the series as a whole. I said it right that time. This season has been a truly incredible thing to experience firsthand along with everybody else. Watching it every Saturday for months and just seeing the story and the characters develop and seeing the reaction from the rest of the fandom, it's been wonderful. We got the overarching threat of the Day of Unity looming over and building up over the course of the season, but we also had our characters go on emotional, personal journeys as well, overcoming obstacles and becoming better people. I mean, Luce grew so much, not just in her ability to use magic and become as much of a real witch as any real witch, but also learned how to face reality, deal with real issues, and not treat it all like one big fairy tale. Ida accepted her curse as part of her, reunited with her old flame Rain, and reconnected with not just her biological family, but her newfound family as well, and grew to care about Luce and King as her own children. King learned more about who he is and where he came from, and realized that the way he wanted people to see him has changed, and he grew to see himself as an invaluable part of his family who can help when given the chance. Amity broke away from her controlling and abusive mother and reconnected with her father, and realized that she's worth more than her accolades. Her and Luce became an actual couple, and blossomed into a healthy, caring relationship. Willow realized her full potential and leaned into it instead of shying away and acting like she was lesser and needed looking after. Gus learned not to let people take advantage of his trustworthy nature and be able to put his trust in people he cares about and himself. Hunter was able to break out of the indoctrination and all the lies fed to him by Belos and the Emperor's Coven, make friends and do not just what he's told to do, but what's right. Lilith felt guilty about everything she did to Ida and did all she could to make up for it, reconnected with her and learned to embrace her family and know that she could rely on them and be someone outside of the Emperor's Coven. And Hooty? Well, Hooty was always flawless. Plus, he made Lumity cannons. But really, it's been a truly incredible season all the way through, in spite of the limitations Disney placed on Dana and the crew. And they should all be really proud of it. I don't envy them having to do it, but they did it, and look what they made out of those limitations. Something truly special. So I do hope people keep that in mind when going into Season 3, and not go into it with this mentality of, it's all crammed into only 3 episodes, if only we had another full season, because that just kind of takes away from the hard work that undoubtedly went into it. In fact, I think Season 3 is going to be even stronger. Yes, it's only 3 episodes, but they're double-length episodes. I mean, imagine all the stuff we could get from a single episode that doesn't need to wrap up its self-contained plot in 22 minutes. In fact, for all I know, it could just be like one long 3-part story. Imagine that! That's over 2 hours. That's longer than most movies. However they go about it, it is comforting to know that we've still got more Owl House left to go. And I look forward to it. I mean, I might have to do a video for each one as they come out, but we'll just have to wait and see. Okay, do I have time to do the outro? So thank you all for watching and or listening. No need to leave some specific word in your comments this time. I know now that people do actually watch to the end. Thank you for that. Feel free to leave a comment though. I do enjoy interacting with you guys through the comments. It's one of the best parts of making YouTube videos. I will have the full... Okay, hang on. There's a helicopter or a plane going. Oh, it's a plane. Oh, it's 2 planes. Oh my god. There's 2 planes right next to each other. They're flying side by side. Oh, that's so cool. Dude, that's awesome. Wow. Oh, that was amazing. I will have the full episodes 1 to 5 of the Foul House single video up next week. I know some of you are still wondering if I'll continue that series, but I think now it's probably safe to say that that almost definitely won't happen. I think 5 episodes is enough. They work on their own. I don't really want to get burned out on Owl House YTPs. You get it. But I'm glad so many people enjoyed them so much. They were a lot of fun, and I'll be talking about them more in the next part of the YTP retrospective. Sorry for the delay on that, but like I said, it has kind of been difficult to focus on other things while this show is still airing. But yeah, the third part of the retrospective will be coming out on June 25th. So 3 weeks from the day that this video is published. And I'll probably have something else in between on the 18th as well. So yeah, a video every week this month. And I do have something planned for July, but I'm not sure if or how that will work. I don't know. But either way, I hope you look forward to all of that, or some of that, whatever particular ones interest you, you know. So thank you all for sticking to the end of this incredibly long video. I think this is like, it's got to be close to 1 hour and 3/4 now. I think this is now probably officially my second longest video on the channel, if I'm not mistaken. So, thanks for taking the time to be here with me, and I will see you all very, very soon. Later, taters. And everyone's brought this up already, but it's nice that when Amity tells him... That's what Amity tells him.